I still remember how ordinary that afternoon was supposed to be. I was at my desk, half buried in emails, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted like cardboard, thinking more about what I'd cook for dinner than about the spreadsheet on my screen. In my head, my life was not perfect, but stable. I kept telling myself I was lucky. A husband at home, a roof over our heads, a routine that didn't scare me. He had said recently that I was too focused on work, that I'd been distant, and I'd carried that like guilt in the back of my mind, trying to compensate with little gestures. So there I was, planning to leave on time for once, maybe pick up his favorite dessert, trying to be that wife he said he missed. My phone started buzzing on the desk, the screen lighting up with my neighbor's name. It was odd. She rarely called, usually just waved from across the driveway. When I picked up, her voice came out tense, almost embarrassed. She said she was sorry to bother me, but she asked if I could, please, keep the intimate noises down, because she could hear everything through the wall. For a second, I didn't understand. I actually laughed, assuming it was a joke. I told her I wasn't even home, that I was at the office, and she must be mistaken. But she insisted she could hear my voice, said it sounded exactly like me, moaning, laughing, calling my husband's name. There was this awkward pause while she tried to sound polite, and I felt a cold wave crawling up my spine. Everything around me suddenly went muffled, like someone had turned down the volume of the entire office. I stared at the gray partition in front of me while her words echoed in my ear. My body reacted before my brain consequently caught up. My hands started shaking, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. She said she just wanted to ask for a little respect, that it was the middle of the afternoon and her kids were in the next room. I murmured something, that I'd take care of it, and hung up without even remembering how I ended the call. Straight away, memories came flooding in. The nights he had said he was too tired, the mornings he had complained there was no spark, the way he had recently pointed out how my schedule was always full. A knot formed in my stomach. I grabbed my purse and my keys in one motion, barely aware of my coworkers, and walked out of the office on shaky legs, with a single thought pulsing in my head. If I'm not home, then who is she hearing? The drive home felt like a blur wrapped in static. I don't even remember fastening my seatbelt, just the way my fingers kept slipping against the steering wheel because my palms were sweating so much. The city outside the windows looked strangely unfamiliar, like I was passing through someone else's life instead of my own. Every red light made my chest tighten, every honk sounded like an accusation, and all I could think about was the neighbor's voice insisting she could hear me inside my house. At one point, I pulled up next to a woman walking her dog, and I caught myself envying her, envying how normal her world looked, how undisturbed, how safe. As I turned onto my street, a wave of nausea hit me. The house looked the same as every other day, calm and quiet, as if nothing was happening inside. My first instinct was denial, that maybe the neighbor had gotten confused, that maybe it was the TV, or a prank, or anything. Anything but the truth clawing at the edges of my mind. But then I noticed something subtle. His car was parked slightly crooked, not aligned the way he always left it. He was annoyingly meticulous about that. It was a tiny detail, but it broke something inside me. I parked a little farther down the street, just far enough that he wouldn't hear the engine, and got out as quietly as I could, my legs unsteady and weak. Walking up to the door felt like walking into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The closer I got, the more I heard. Not clearly, not yet, but muffled sounds, a rhythm, like movement. My breath caught in my throat. I put my hand on the doorknob and hesitated, feeling a tremor run all the way up my arm. This was the moment where part of me still hoped, still begged for this to be a misunderstanding. But deep down, in the darkest chamber of my gut, I already knew. I turned the knob slowly, letting the door open inch by inch, praying it wouldn't creak. The house smelled different, sweeter, warmer, a scent that wasn't mine. And that's when I heard a soft laugh echoing from upstairs. A laugh that wasn't mine, but sounded disturbingly, intentionally close. I froze at the bottom of the stairs, every instinct screaming at me to run and yet pinning my feet to the floor. That laugh, that imitation of my voice, slithered down the staircase like a sick joke, curling around my ribs and squeezing. For a moment, I actually placed my hand against the wall just to steady myself. The wallpaper felt cold, rough against my fingertips, grounding me in a reality I desperately didn't want to face. My heart was beating so loudly I was terrified they'd hear it. I swallowed hard, forcing air into my lungs, and each breath felt sharper than the last, like I was inhaling glass instead of oxygen. Step by step, I climbed the stairs, careful not to let them creak. Every sound grew clearer, the shift of weight on the bed, a faint gasp, a whispered encouragement that made my stomach turn. And then I heard my name. Not the way he used to say it when he hugged me from behind in the kitchen, not the way he murmured it when he asked if I wanted tea, but twisted, stretched into some performative moan, something theatrical and ugly, something meant to please him. My knees nearly buckled. I covered my mouth with my hand to stop a sob from slipping out, feeling tears gather at the corners of my eyes but refusing to let them fall. Not yet. Not before I saw. When I reached the top step, I stopped again and listened. There was a moment, a tiny, fragile moment, where everything went silent on the other side of that bedroom door, as if the universe itself were holding its breath with me. And in that second, I felt something deep inside me shift, like a crack forming in a pane of glass right before it shatters. I placed my hand on the doorknob, feeling its warmth, their warmth, and twisted it slowly. Whatever was waiting for me behind that door, I knew it wasn't just betrayal. It was something far more personal, far more cruel. Something that would change the entire fabric of my life the moment I laid eyes on it. When the door swung open, the world didn't just break. It collapsed. There they were, tangled in the sheets I had washed 2 days before, the ones that still smelled faintly of lavender softener. His back was turned to me, but I recognized the curve of his shoulders, the small mole near his spine, every inch of him I had once memorized with love. And beneath him, I saw her legs first. Familiar legs. Legs I had seen running beside mine in childhood, sticking out from under the covers during sleepovers, crossed casually during Sunday lunches. My sister, my own blood. She turned her head toward me, her hair messy, her expression twisted into shock, then panic, and some part of me registered that she hadn't even had time to pretend she wasn't enjoying it. He froze when he noticed my shadow against the wall. He didn't jump away, didn't yank the covers up, didn't even look ashamed. He just turned his head slightly and said, in this annoyed, breathless voice, that I was not supposed to be home yet, as if I had ruined their afternoon plans. My sister scrambled, covering herself clumsily, muttering that it wasn't what it looked like, even though her voice was still shaky with pleasure. Their bodies, their faces, the heat lingering in the room, everything screamed exactly what it was. My mind couldn't process it fast enough. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion while your brain keeps insisting you're imagining it. He finally stood up, grabbing a pillow to cover himself, and had the audacity, the absolute gall, to say that I misunderstood, that we should talk about this like adults. He even said that I had been emotionally absent, that he needed to feel alive, and that my sister just happened to be there. Hearing him reduce a betrayal of this magnitude to a moment of weakness nearly made me laugh. Not a sane laugh, but the kind that cracks under pressure. My sister sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, whispering that she never meant to hurt me. As if meaning made any difference. As if meaning could erase the knife they'd both driven into my spine. I didn't step forward. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything, even though my hands itched to rip the room apart piece by piece. Instead, I just stood there, clinging to the door frame like it was the only thing keeping me upright. They looked at me as if waiting for a reaction, a meltdown, a fight, a scene. But nothing came out. My silence unsettled them more than any outburst ever could. He kept saying he could explain, his voice low and coaxing, the same voice he once used when he wanted me to calm down after a stressful day. Now it just sounded slimy. My sister's eyes darted everywhere, floor, window, ceiling, anywhere but me. The room felt hot, suffocating, like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Inside my chest, something hollowed out, a sharp, cold emptiness that spread through me like frostbite. I remembered flashes, birthdays, inside jokes, the time I braided her hair before a school dance, the night she cried, and I held her until she fell asleep. I remembered defending her from family gossip, paying her bills when she was struggling, lending her my clothes, my time, my trust. My throat tightened painfully. I wanted to ask her why, but the question was too big, too heavy, like lifting a broken car off the ground. And honestly, I already knew the answer. She had always wanted what I had, ever since we were kids. Attention, stability, love, even if it wasn't meant for her. He took a step toward me, still holding that stupid pillow, and said I was taking it the wrong way, as if there were a right way to catch your husband with your sister. Then he added that the neighbor must have exaggerated and that I was overreacting again. Again. That word hit me like a slap. Suddenly, I heard every past conversation differently. All the times he told me I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional. All the times he twisted things until I doubted myself. And as he spoke now, I realized something chilling. He truly believed I would forgive him. He truly expected me to fold, like I always had. That thought, that smug certainty, lit a fire low in my stomach, a slow, steady flame that didn't burn out. My sister finally lifted her head, her face blotchy and flushed, and whispered my name like she expected sympathy, as if she thought I'd kneel beside her and soothe her like I always had. She said she never meant for things to get this far, that it just happened, that they didn't plan it. Lies wrapped in excuses, dripping with cowardice. I watched her mouth move, forming words that no longer meant anything coming from her. The girl I grew up with, the one I protected from every storm, sat in front of me now as a stranger wearing her face. And instead of crying, I felt this eerie calm slide through me, a numbness so deep it was almost peaceful. It terrified them more than screams ever would. He kept talking over her, trying to regain control of the moment. He said we could go to therapy, that couples survive worse things, that family doesn't fall apart over one mistake. One mistake. I looked at the two of them, the bed, the sheets, the sweat still drying on their skin, and wondered how many one mistakes had come before this one. His voice droned on, pathetic and desperate, but something in me had already detached. It felt like stepping outside my own body and watching the scene from above. Watching her, the woman who tried so hard to hold everything together, finally understand it had never been up to her. Not really. I backed away slowly, my hand sliding off the doorframe. Their voices overlapped, him asking me to stay, her pleading for forgiveness, both of them terrified of what my silence meant. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them a single word. Their panic was almost palpable, a frantic shift in energy as I turned and walked down the hallway. Every step felt heavier, but also clearer. Like each footfall marked a small return to myself. By the time I reached the stairs, I knew something with complete certainty. Whatever came next would not be for them. It would be for me. And for the first time since the phone call at work, I felt the faintest spark of control flicker back to life inside my chest. I locked myself in the bathroom the moment I reached it, turning the knob with a trembling hand and pressing my back against the door, as if I needed to hold the entire world out. The quiet in there felt unnatural, like the silence after a bomb goes off, when everything is dust and ringing ears. My breath came out shaky, uneven, and I slid down the door until I was sitting on the cold tiles. The chill seeped through my clothes, grounding me in a way I desperately needed. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. It was as if my body understood the truth before my mind could catch up. I buried my face in my palms and finally let the tears spill, hot and heavy, dripping between my fingers. The bathroom smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the diffuser I kept there, a scent I had always associated with calm. But now it made my stomach twist. Everything felt tainted. The blue towel hanging beside me, the toothbrush cup, the soft yellow light, all of it belonged to the life I thought I had. a life that no longer existed. I tried to steady my breathing, counting slowly, but every inhale shook with the raw ache clawing at my chest. My mind kept replaying the scene upstairs. The sheets, the sounds, the way he looked annoyed instead of ashamed. And worse, the way my sister hadn't even looked surprised. That image burned behind my eyelids like a brand. For a moment, I let myself fall apart completely. Silent sobs shook through me, the kind that leave you lightheaded, the kind that hurt. I pressed the heels of my palms against my eyes, trying to block out everything. Their voices muffled through the walls, the betrayal pounding in my skull, the nausea rising in my throat. I felt small and broken and horribly alone. But beneath all of that, the grief, the humiliation, the shock, something else was forming. Quiet at first, then clearer. A flicker of anger, sharp and steady. It didn't roar, it didn't explode, it just settled. Right there in the hollow space where my trust used to be. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just mourning what they had done. I was mourning who I had been before I saw it. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my shirt, feeling the fabric cling to my damp skin. My reflection in the mirror above the sink looked like someone I didn't recognize. Eyes swollen and glassy, cheeks streaked, lips trembling. I leaned closer, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. There was a strange clarity in seeing myself like that. I looked broken, yes, but I also looked awake. Truly awake. As if every lie, every dismissal, every gaslight-filled argument over the years had finally lined up in perfect focus. He had always said I was too emotional, that I imagined things, that I needed to stop overthinking. Funny how all the pieces snapped together now, revealing a truth he never wanted me to see. Their voices seeped faintly through the walls, frantic whispers, hurried footsteps, the rustle of fabric. I could practically picture them scrambling, trying to clean up the mess they'd made, trying to prepare excuses. The thought made a bitter laugh catch in my throat, but it didn't fully form. Instead, a cold determination settled where the ache had been. A shift. A pivot. I straightened my spine and rinsed my face with cold water, feeling the sharp sting of it against my skin. The shock brought me back into my body, back into the moment. I wasn't going to let the girl crying on the floor be the version of me they remembered. Memories flickered behind my eyes like scenes from an old film, moments from childhood with my sister. The time I gave her my allowance so she could buy a dress she wanted. The nights she cried over breakups and I stayed awake consoling her. The years she lived on my couch without paying a cent because I didn't want her struggling alone. And now she had repaid every act of loyalty with betrayal so deep it felt like a wound carved from the inside out. But even as the pain pulsed, I felt something else blooming through it. Resolve. A calm, chilling certainty. I knew then that I wouldn't scream, wouldn't argue, wouldn't beg. They had expected chaos, expected me to crumble. But what was coming next? They would never see it coming. I stood there for another moment, letting the last drops of water slide down my face before I reached for a towel. The simple act of drying my skin felt strangely symbolic, like wiping away the version of me who still believed in them. When I opened the bathroom cabinet to return the towel, my eyes landed on a small box of first aid supplies. Inside it was a pair of scissors, not dangerous ones, just the cheap, blunt household kind. But I stared at them for a long second, realizing how easily rage could twist into recklessness. I closed the cabinet immediately. No, I wouldn't give them that story. I wouldn't become the villain in the tale they'd tell about me later. I would stay quiet, controlled, calculated. That alone would unnerve them more than any explosion of fury ever could. When I finally unlocked the bathroom door, the hallway felt different, too quiet, too still. I could sense that they had stopped whispering, like children caught doing something forbidden. I didn't walk toward the bedroom. I walked away from it. Their tension followed me like a shadow. I could feel their uncertainty, their fear of my silence, filling the space between us. With every step I took, I felt myself regaining pieces of power I didn't even know I had lost. I went into the guest room and grabbed the small suitcase I kept in the closet. Not to run away, not yet. Just to gather myself, to create distance. The zipper slicing through the quiet felt like a line being drawn in the sand. As I sat on the edge of the guest bed, suitcase beside me, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from my neighbor, the one who had unknowingly detonated my afternoon. She apologized again, saying she hadn't meant to cause trouble, that she only called because the noises were very loud and very specific. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a peculiar mix of pain and vindication. My own sister had been mimicking my voice to excite him, to replace me, to erase me. The realization settled into my bones, cold and steady. I took a slow, deep breath and looked toward the doorway, where their shadows flickered faintly. They thought they knew me. They thought they could predict my every reaction. But something inside me had shifted, and I knew, with absolute, unwavering certainty, that what came next would not be forgiveness. It would be the beginning of their unraveling. They must have heard the zipper of the suitcase, because a moment later he appeared hesitantly in the doorway, still clutching that ridiculous pillow like it was some kind of moral shield. His voice came out cautious, rehearsed, the way someone speaks to a wild animal they're afraid might bite. He said we needed to talk, that he didn't want things to spiral, that I was jumping to conclusions. Hearing him try to manage the situation, to regain control, ignited something dark and steady inside me. I didn't look up. I kept folding a sweater into the suitcase with careful, deliberate precision, as if he weren't even there. The longer I stayed silent, the more frantic his tone became. Behind him, my sister hovered in the hall wearing one of my robes, the pale pink one I kept for lazy Sundays. It hung off her like it didn't belong to her, and seeing her wrapped in something so intimate, something so mine, made my stomach twist. She tried to speak too, saying they messed up, that things got complicated, and that she never wanted to come between us. Every word sounded like wet paper, flimsy, useless, ready to dissolve. I still didn't answer. I wasn't going to gift them my grief. I wasn't going to show them the depth of what they'd taken from me. So I just smoothed another shirt in the suitcase and zipped one of the pockets closed, slow enough to make them squirm. He finally stepped inside the room, lowering the pillow like he thought we'd reached that level of civility again, and said he didn't deserve to have his life destroyed over a mistake. That phrase, his life destroyed, nearly made me laugh. My voice felt like a foreign object in my throat, but I managed to say quietly, "You're worried about your life being destroyed?" The way his face paled told me everything. He had expected tears, shouting, a breakdown, something loud and chaotic he could later twist into, "She overreacted." Instead, I simply stood, closed the suitcase, and met his eyes with a calm I didn't even know I was capable of. And judging by the fear flashing across his face, it was the calm that terrified him most. I walked right past him, suitcase in hand, and headed downstairs. My steps were steady now, too steady, and I could feel both of them trailing behind me like ghosts. He kept asking where I was going, saying we could fix this, that it didn't have to end like this. Each word sounded more desperate, more hollow, as if he was trying to plug holes in a sinking ship with his bare hands. I didn't answer. I didn't even look over my shoulder. When I reached the living room, I set the suitcase down beside the couch and opened the drawer where we kept our shared documents: marriage license, bank papers, insurance, tax returns. I'm the one who organized everything. He never even knew which folder held what. And that, suddenly, felt like a weapon in my hands. My fingers moved automatically, flipping through files with the ease of someone who had built a life brick by brick, only to watch the whole structure tilt under the weight of betrayal. Behind me, my sister spoke again, her voice cracking in a pathetic attempt at sincerity. She said I was being cold, that she didn't recognize me, that I was acting like a stranger. I almost smiled at that, because she was right. She didn't recognize me. She had spent her entire life relying on the version of me who forgave, who fixed, who carried the weight for everyone else. She didn't know this woman, the one who wasn't crumbling, wasn't shaking, wasn't begging for explanations. She didn't understand that once betrayal slices that deep, something inside you stops bleeding and turns to steel. I finally pulled out the folder I needed, the one with our joint financial documents. As I opened it on the coffee table, he stepped closer and told me I was making things worse, that my silence was cruel, that I was trying to ruin him. The irony of hearing him call me cruel almost made me laugh, but instead of reacting, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the recording app, opened it slowly, and let them both see the red timestamp from earlier, the moment I had pressed record while they were panicking upstairs. His breath hitched. My sister's hand flew to her mouth, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't have to say a single word. The recording did it for me. Their own voices spilled into the room, echoing back at them with brutal clarity. His panicked whispers, her trembling confessions, their frantic attempts to piece together a story that would make them seem less monstrous. And then, the part that made the hair on my arms rise. My sister practicing my voice, that breathy imitation she thought would fool a neighbor through the wall. Hearing it from the outside, hearing her try to be me, it felt like a theft far deeper than sex. It was like she had crawled under my skin, into my life, trying to erase me entirely. The room went still. Neither of them tried to speak now. There was nothing left to twist, nothing to deny. I pressed pause and slipped the phone into my pocket with a calmness that made both of them flinch. Then I picked up the marriage folder again, flipping through pages until I reached the account statements. His eyes widened as he realized what I already knew. The transfers he made to her, disguised as shared expenses, were right there in black and white. Money he said he used for bills, repairs, errands. I had trusted him so blindly that I hadn't questioned the discrepancies, the withdrawals that didn't match our household spending. My sister choked out a weak explanation, saying she needed help, that he was only supporting her a little, but her voice was faded, brittle, collapsing in on itself. She knew she was caught. She knew there was no way out. He took a step forward, palms open, pleading now. He said I was blowing up our lives, that I was throwing everything away, that I was punishing him more than he deserved. That word again, deserved. As if betrayal came with a scale, as if he could decide how much pain I was allowed to feel, as if I owed him restraint. I closed the folder quietly and looked up at him for the first time since the bedroom, and something in my expression, the steadiness, the finality, made his face drain of color. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I simply said, "I'm not punishing you. I'm documenting you." His mouth opened, then shut again. He knew exactly what that meant, and for the first time that day, the fear on his face tasted like justice. The next morning, I woke before dawn, long before either of them dared move around the house. The air felt colder than usual, sharper, as if even the walls were waiting to see what I would do next. I got dressed slowly, choosing clothes with a steadiness that surprised me. Slacks, a blouse, my hair pulled back neatly. Not the look of a woman falling apart, the look of a woman preparing for a meeting. When I grabbed my purse and the thick folder of documents, I felt no hesitation. No tremor, just purpose. They heard me walking down the stairs and rushed into the living room, their faces exhausted, swollen from a night of anxious whispers I had no interest in hearing. He asked where I was going, trying to sound casual, but his voice cracked on the last word. My sister stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, wearing the same robe she had stolen from my closet. I didn't answer. I just slipped on my coat, adjusted the strap of my purse, and opened the front door. Their panic was instant. He followed me outside, barefoot on the porch, asking if we could talk, if I could be reasonable, if I would at least tell him what I planned to do. I turned to face him, the early morning sun catching his guilt like a spotlight. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No sadness, no rage, no heartbreak, just emptiness, clean and wide. "I have an appointment," I said simply. His face tightened. He knew exactly what kind of appointment. "Karen, please, don't do this," he whispered, stepping closer, lowering his voice as if that would soften the blow. He said he didn't want to lose everything, that this didn't have to get ugly, that we could settle things privately. That was when I saw it clearly. The fear wasn't about losing me. It was about losing comfort. Stability, the life I built and he merely lived in. I locked the car door behind me, stared straight at him, and replied, "You already made it ugly." Then I drove off without looking back, feeling the faintest spark of power warming my chest as the house shrank in the rearview mirror. The lawyer's office sat on the corner of a quiet street, all glass walls and polished wood, the kind of place where truth gets organized, labeled, and weaponized. When I stepped inside, the receptionist greeted me with a warm smile, but I must have looked different from the women who usually walked through those doors. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't frantic. I was focused. She offered me water, and I took it, realizing my hands weren't shaking anymore. By the time I was called into the attorney's office, a calm man with steady eyes and a voice that didn't rush, I felt strangely steady, almost anchored. As I laid the documents across his desk, I watched his expression shift from curiosity to understanding to something close to indignation on my behalf. He asked gentle, clarifying questions, never once implying doubt. And when he reached the financial statements, the hidden transfers, the recorded confession, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled sharply. He told me, in plain terms, that the situation put me in a powerful position, that I had been the provider, the responsible one, the one holding the household together, financially, emotionally, structurally. He explained how the law viewed betrayal tied to misuse of funds, how judges reacted to infidelity involving a family member, how assets were commonly split when one spouse had caused demonstrable harm. Every word he said felt like a brick being lifted from my chest. When he slid the prepared documents across the desk toward me, the formal separation request, the financial motions, the protective clauses, something inside me clicked into place. A kind of clarity, a kind of quiet triumph. He asked if I wanted him to deliver the papers, or if I preferred to do it myself. For a second, I imagined handing them directly to my husband, watching his face fall as he realized I was no longer his safety net. But then I saw my sister's robe, my husband's pillow, their tangled bodies, her stolen imitation of my voice, and I knew I didn't need to hand anything to him personally. Not anymore. "Send everything to him," I said softly. "Let him read it alone." The lawyer nodded, and just like that, the first official step toward my freedom was made. When I arrived back home later that afternoon, the air felt different, heavy, nervous, trembling with anticipation. His car was still parked crooked in the driveway, and for a moment I just stood there, watching the house that had once been my safe place. I walked inside quietly, almost ceremonially, and found both of them sitting on the couch like scolded children, their faces pale and tight. He held a stack of papers in his hands, the ones the lawyer had sent. He must have opened the email the moment it arrived. My sister sat beside him, knees drawn up, looking small for the first time in her life, and yet, not small enough. He rose to his feet the second he saw me, the papers trembling in his grip. He said I didn't have to go this far, that I was ruining his future, that the lawyer was making things worse. I just stood there, my coat still on, my purse still over my shoulder, and let him speak. He talked and talked, words spilling out like someone trying to plug a sinking boat with tissue paper. He said he would change, that he would cut contact with my sister, who flinched at that, and that we could rebuild. His desperation was loud, her shame was silent, and through it all, my heartbeat stayed calm, steady, unmoved. When he finally ran out of excuses, I stepped closer and reached into my folder. I pulled out a single printed page, a bank statement showing months of transfers to her. I placed it gently on the coffee table between them. He stared at it with wide eyes, then looked up at me, whispering, "Don't do this. Don't destroy me." That's when something inside me softened, not with forgiveness, but with clarity. He wasn't begging for our marriage. He was begging for his comfort, his image, his convenience. "I'm not destroying you," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." I turned away, headed for the stairs, and for the first time since everything began, I felt the weight loosen from my chest. Not gone, not healed, but loosening, like a knot finally beginning to untangle.